Something is happening to you right now, and it has been happening so slowly that you have not noticed it. You are not getting physically weaker. You are not losing intelligence. But the part of you that is responsible for tolerating discomfort, for pushing through difficulty, for sitting with uncertainty without immediately reaching for relief, that part is quietly, steadily getting weaker every single day. And the reason it is getting weaker is not because you are a weak person. It is because the entire environment you live in has been engineered to make sure you never have to be uncomfortable for more than 30 seconds. Every craving gets delivered in 40 minutes. Every boredom gets solved by a video that starts automatically. Every difficult emotion gets buried under a scroll. Every moment of silence gets filled before it has a chance to become stillness. And the result of living inside that environment for years, of never being required to sit with discomfort, of always having an escape available, of always choosing the path of least resistance because the path of least resistance is always right. There is a mind that has lost its tolerance for difficulty. A mind that has forgotten how to endure. A mind that mistakes comfort for health and restlessness for ambition. That is what this video is about. And by the time it ends, you are going to understand exactly how this happened, what it is costing you, and what it actually takes to reverse it. Mental strength is not a personality trait you either have or do not have. It is not reserved for soldiers or elite athletes or people who had particularly hard childhoods. It is a capacity, exactly like physical strength, that is built through repeated exposure to difficulty and atrophied through repeated avoidance of it. The research on this is unambiguous. Psychologists call it distress tolerance, and it is one of the most extensively studied variables in clinical and performance psychology. People with high distress tolerance can sit with uncertainty, discomfort, frustration, and delayed gratification without it derailing their behavior. People with low distress tolerance cannot, and the consequences extend far beyond simply feeling uncomfortable. Low distress tolerance is directly correlated with anxiety disorders, depression, substance dependence, relationship instability, and chronic underachievement. It affects every area of life. Today we are going to cover exactly how mental weakness develops, the specific ways modern life accelerates it, what it looks like in daily behavior, and the specific practices that rebuild it. Not motivational theory. Practical, evidence-based understanding of how the mind hardens and softens, and what you can do about it starting today. Chapter 1. How mental weakness develops. Nobody becomes mentally weak overnight. It happens through a process so gradual that most people are deep into it before they recognize any of the symptoms. The process begins with avoidance, specifically the habitual avoidance of discomfort. Every time a human being encounters an unpleasant feeling, boredom, anxiety, frustration, loneliness, the discomfort of a difficult task, the nervous system produces a signal that says find relief. That signal is normal. It is ancient. It is part of the same system that motivated our ancestors to move away from physical danger. The problem in the modern world is not the signal. It is the availability of relief. For the vast majority of human history, when the nervous system said find relief, relief was not immediately available. Boredom could not be resolved in 3 seconds. Loneliness required actual effort to address. Frustration with a difficult problem had nowhere to go except back into the problem. And because relief was not immediately available, the human nervous system was forced to do something it turns out to be very good at when given no other option. It adapted. It built tolerance. It learned to sit with the discomfort long enough for the discomfort to pass, and in that process of sitting with it, it got stronger. The modern world has eliminated that forced adaptation almost entirely. Relief is now available for every discomfort within seconds. Bored? Pick up the phone. Anxious? Open the app. Lonely? scroll through a feed that produces the social signal your nervous system was looking for. Frustrated with something hard, switch to something easy. Every one of those relief behaviors is individually harmless. But the cumulative effect, the pattern of never being required to sit with discomfort for more than a moment, is the systematic erosion of the very capacity that makes difficult things possible. Psychologists call this process experiential avoidance, and it is one of the most well-documented mechanisms behind the development of anxiety, depression, and what most people would simply call an inability to cope. The more consistently a person avoids discomfort, the lower their threshold for it becomes, meaning each new round of avoidance makes the next uncomfortable experience feel more unbearable, which produces more avoidance, which lowers the threshold further. It is a self-reinforcing spiral, and modern life makes entering it almost automatic. Chapter 2. The 7 signs you are already there. Most people who are in the process of becoming mentally weaker do not identify it that way. They experience it as specific, seemingly unrelated symptoms that they explain with specific, seemingly reasonable justifications. There are 7 signs that are worth examining directly. The first sign is an inability to be bored without immediately reaching for stimulation. If you cannot sit in a waiting room, stand in a line, ride an elevator, or wait for food to arrive without pulling out your phone, your distress tolerance for boredom has eroded. Boredom is a mild discomfort. The fact that it has become intolerable enough to require immediate relief is a signal worth paying attention to. The second sign is emotional fragility in the face of criticism or setback. If a single critical comment from a boss, a partner, a stranger on the internet, derails your mood for hours or days, the system that is supposed to buffer you against normal social discomfort is not functioning at a healthy level. The third sign is chronic task avoidance, the consistent pattern of delaying the most important and most difficult work indefinitely, while staying busy with easier things. Procrastination is not a time management problem. It is a distress tolerance problem. The task that is being avoided produces discomfort, uncertainty, fear of failure, the effort required, and the nervous system is refusing to sit with that discomfort long enough for the work to begin. The fourth sign is an inability to tolerate uncertainty. If unanswered questions, unresolved situations, and outcomes that are not yet known produce anxiety intense enough to drive compulsive checking behavior, repeatedly checking your phone for a response, refreshing a page, seeking reassurance from multiple people, your tolerance for the discomfort of not knowing has become critically low. The fifth sign is needing external validation to sustain motivation. If you cannot continue working on something unless other people are acknowledging it, encouraging it, or responding to it with approval, your internal capacity for self-direction, which depends on tolerating the discomfort of effort without external reward, has weakened significantly. The sixth sign is physical avoidance of mild discomfort. If you choose the escalator over the stairs every time, not because of injury or fatigue, but simply because the stairs involve effort, if you avoid weather that is merely inconvenient, if you consistently choose the shorter, easier physical path as a default, these micro-choices are both symptoms and contributors to a broader pattern of comfort-seeking that strengthens. Across all domains of life, the seventh sign is emotional, numbing through constant entertainment. If you cannot end an evening without screens, cannot process a difficult feeling without something to watch or listen to, cannot sit in silence for 5 minutes without the silence itself becoming uncomfortable, your nervous system has lost its capacity for what psychologists call affect tolerance, the ability to experience and process an emotional state without needing to escape it. Chapter 3. What it is actually costing you mental weakness is not just uncomfortable to live with. It has specific, measurable costs across every domain of a person's life. And most people who are experiencing those costs are attributing them to the wrong causes. The most significant cost is in the area of meaningful work. Every important goal, building a business, mastering a skill, creating something of value, advancing a career, involves sustained effort in the face of difficulty, uncertainty, and repeated failure. The person with high distress tolerance can sit with the discomfort of not yet being good enough, of not yet seeing results, of doing hard work without immediate reward. The person with low distress tolerance cannot sustain that effort. They quit when the discomfort peaks, which is almost always just before the point where the compounding of effort would have begun producing visible results. This is why so many people in America today have long lists of things they started and abandoned, not because they lacked talent or time, but because the discomfort of the process became more unbearable than the pain of quitting. The second major cost is in relationships. Authentic relationships require the capacity to tolerate discomfort, the discomfort of conflict, the discomfort of vulnerability, the discomfort of another person's difficult emotions, the discomfort of being truly known rather than presenting a carefully managed version of yourself. A person who habitually avoids discomfort will habitually avoid the experiences that build genuine intimacy, and the relationships in their life will reflect that avoidance, surface level, fragile, and ultimately unsatisfying. The third cost is in decision-making. Good decisions often require sitting with uncertainty for extended periods, gathering information, tolerating not yet knowing, resisting the pressure to resolve the discomfort of indecision by choosing the familiar option rather than the right one. A person with low distress tolerance makes decisions impulsively, seeking to resolve the discomfort of uncertainty rather than to optimize the outcome. Over years of compounding impulsive decisions, this produces a life that feels like it belongs to someone else, a life shaped more by the need for immediate relief than by genuine values and long-term intention. The fourth cost is in mental health itself. The research on experiential avoidance and psychological well-being is unambiguous. The consistent avoidance of uncomfortable internal experiences produces more suffering over time, not less. The anxiety that is avoided in the short term does not disappear. It grows. The emotion that is numb does not resolve. It accumulates. The discomfort that is escaped through entertainment, scrolling, or substance does not diminish. It waits. And the person who has spent years avoiding it has a nervous system that is less and less equipped to handle it when it eventually becomes unavoidable. Chapter 4. Why Modern Life Accelerates at Understanding that Mental Weakness Develops Through Avoidance is Important. Understanding why modern life makes avoidance almost inevitable is what makes this problem so urgent and so widespread. The speed, frictionlessness, and abundance of the modern comfort economy has produced an environment that is extraordinarily good at eliminating the conditions under which mental strength naturally develops. Delayed gratification, waiting for something you want, was once a normal feature of daily life. You wanted food, you prepared it. You wanted entertainment, you found it. You wanted connection, you went somewhere. The effort and the waiting were built into the process, and they produced a form of low-level tolerance training that most people never thought of as training because it was simply life. Today, the waiting has been eliminated from almost every domain. Food arrives in minutes. Entertainment is infinite and instantaneous. Connection is a tap away. Every system that might have required patience, persistence, or discomfort has been optimized to remove those requirements as completely as possible, because removing them is good for business, and because consumers consistently choose the frictionless option over the one that Build something in them. The result is a population that is, on aggregate, experiencing what researchers at the American Psychological Association have described as a crisis of distress tolerance, a measurable, generation-spanning decline in the ability to handle difficulty, uncertainty, and delayed reward. The data supporting this is consistent across multiple fields: rising rates of anxiety disorders, declining persistence rates in academic and professional settings, increasing rates of what therapists describe as low frustration tolerance across all adult age groups. These are not coincidental trends. They are the predictable outputs of an environment that has systematically removed the natural conditions that build mental resilience. This is not nostalgia for a harder world. Difficulty for its own sake has no value. The point is not that life should be uncomfortable. The point is that a life in which difficulty is never required is a life in which a specific and crucial capacity is never exercised, and a capacity that is never exercised atrophies regardless of how intelligent, educated, or self-aware the person failing to exercise it happens to be. Chapter 5. How to Build It Back. Mental strength is rebuilt through the same mechanism by which it is lost, through repeated exposure to discomfort. But the exposure needs to be deliberate, graduated, and understood clearly for what it is: training, not punishment. The first and most powerful practice is voluntary discomfort. This means intentionally choosing the harder option in situations where the easier option is available, and where the harder option has no external reward. Taking the stairs when the elevator is right there. Sitting with boredom for 10 minutes without reaching for your phone. Finishing a difficult task before switching to an easier one. Having the uncomfortable conversation rather than avoiding it for another week. Each of these small chosen discomforts does something that feels disproportionate to its apparent significance. It proves to your nervous system that discomfort is survivable. That proof accumulates, and accumulated proof of survivability is what distress tolerance is made of. The second practice is progressive exposure to difficulty. The same principle that governs physical training governs mental training. You do not begin a strength training program by lifting the maximum weight. You begin with a weight that is challenging but manageable and increase it gradually as your capacity grows. The mental equivalent of this is identifying the specific discomfort that your nervous system currently refuses, the task you chronically avoid, the emotion you consistently numb, the uncertainty you compulsively seek to resolve, and beginning with the smallest possible exposure to it. Not the full confrontation. Just enough to stay with it 1 degree longer than your habit says you should. Over time, with consistency, the threshold rises. What was previously intolerable becomes merely uncomfortable. What was previously merely uncomfortable becomes manageable. What was previously manageable becomes routine. The third practice is eliminating automatic escape routes. If every time a difficult feeling arises your nervous system has immediate access to a reliable escape, the phone, the food, the screen, the substance, it will take that escape every time, regardless of your intentions. The practice here is not willpower. It is environment design. Put the phone in another room during the hours when you are working on things that matter. Remove the applications that you reach for automatically when discomfort peaks. Create the physical and structural conditions under which your nervous system is required to sit with the discomfort rather than being rescued from it by habit. The research on behavioral change consistently shows that removing the escape route is more effective than strengthening the willpower required to resist it. The fourth practice is physical difficulty. The body and the mind share a nervous system, and training one trains the other. Research on the psychological effects of regular, intense physical exercise consistently shows improvements in distress tolerance, emotional regulation, and resilience that extend far beyond the physical domain. A person who trains their body to endure physical difficulty through consistent exercise that is genuinely demanding rather than comfortable is also training their nervous system's capacity to endure difficulty in general. The carryover is real, documented, and one of the most consistently reliable pathways to improved mental strength, available to any person regardless of their starting point. Chapter 6. The Identity Behind the Strength. Everything discussed so far, voluntary discomfort, progressive exposure, environmental design, physical training, produces genuine change. But the change that lasts, the change that does not require constant maintenance and repeated remotivation, comes from something deeper than practice. It comes from identity. A person who sees themselves as someone who avoids difficulty will avoid difficulty even when they know they should not. A person who has built the identity of someone who does hard things will do hard things even when it costs them something. Identity is not declared. It is constructed through behavior. Every time you choose the harder option when the easier one was available, you cast a vote for the identity of someone who can handle difficulty. Every time you sit with the discomfort instead of reaching for an escape, you cast a vote for the identity of someone who does not need to be rescued from their own internal experience. Votes accumulate. And enough accumulated votes produce not just behavior but a self-concept, a stable, deeply held belief about who you are that carries you through the moments when motivation is absent and the habit of avoidance is loudest. The people who demonstrate genuine mental strength in the face of real difficulty are not people who are never uncomfortable. They are people who have accumulated enough evidence of their own capacity that the discomfort, when it comes, does not produce doubt. They have been here before. They have sat with this before. They know, from experience and not from hope, that they can get through it. That knowledge is built one small chosen discomfort at a time. There is no shortcut to it. There is no substitute for it. But it is available to every person who is willing to stop choosing comfort as a default and start choosing difficulty as a practice, not because suffering is virtuous, but because the strength that comes from enduring difficulty is the only kind of strength that actually matters when life requires it. 19 o'clock to 20 o'clock. You are not mentally weak because you are a weak person. You are mentally weak because you live in an environment that has systematically removed every requirement for mental strength. And you have adapted to that environment exactly the way any organism adapts to its conditions. But adaptation goes in both directions. The same nervous system that softened in response to comfort will harden in response to deliberate difficulty. The same brain that learned to expect immediate relief can learn to expect itself to endure that it does not happen through inspiration. It does not happen through reading or watching videos about it. It happens through the repeated, unglamorous, daily practice of choosing difficulty when comfort is available, of staying in the discomfort 1 minute longer, finishing the task before switching, having the conversation instead of avoiding it, sitting with the silence instead of filling it. 1 degree harder than yesterday. Every day that is not suffering. That is building. And what gets built? A mind that can endure, persist, tolerate, and ultimately do the things that matter is the most useful thing a person can construct in their own life.